Welcome to this edition of ACN Conversations, a media resource of the Association of Christian Nonprofits. I'm Doug Leslie.
One global pastor, I want to kind of get some of these folks into the conversation because it's important for people to hear about them. Where this domain situation is crystal clear is Josie Chaco. Is that how you pronounce it?
Yeah, Josie Chaco.
Josie Chaco. Can you tell us about who he is and kind of what you've learned from him and his approach?
Yeah, Josie comes from a very significant family from India, and he had some family problems when he was a young man and went to Australia and actually became a businessman and is extremely successful. As a matter of fact, he spoke last year at Willow Creek's Leadership Summit. So Josie is a business guy who is just over-the-top successful, but he began to use that management that he learned in business as he began to start churches. And he was starting churches the way that I've been explaining in Domain. So they would start a community center, teach people how to sew, teach them how to work. The pastors of his churches would adopt kids that were orphans from the community. So nearly every domain of society would be represented when Josie would come in and start one of his community centers. And then from there, they would start multiple churches. And Josie totally gets it. And so he brings tremendous value to the society. As a result of that, he's incredibly connected to the Indian government, the Indian entertainment industry, Indian security. I mean, every conceivable dimension. We were with Josie in December. That's where we met this last December, studying his work and ministry and so forth. And he's radically connected. When you do the domains, what happens is when you just do church, you're connected to church people and who your church people may or may not know. When you do domains, you get connected to your city or your country. And so that relationship and network is very different from most pastors' network that they have. And Josie lives that. He gets it. He does it.
That's really, really good. Another directive that you've learned from your interactions is moving from the sterile institution, and we've already kind of spoken about this, to the authentic relationships, right? So not just building buildings and having a great grand way to put more body in the seat so you can get more revenues, you can pay for those buildings, but actually engaging people in relationship. Tell us more about your relationship with Terry Virgo.
Oh, I love Terry Virgo. Terry's like a spiritual father to me. So Terry, you know, the big thing, Doug, we did to start churches in the past were denominations. And then we began to learn, I don't know, about 15 years ago, everybody started doing networks.
Right.
You know, it was, okay, we may be in the same denomination, but we want to focus on church planting, for example, over against all this other stuff. And we don't want to do all the other denominational stuff. But as I began to look at Terry and I began to study networks around the world, I was blown away because in my limited understanding, I just assumed, okay, so that's his global network. Terry has New Frontiers. And Terry had me come and speak. Terry didn't even explain this to us. What I saw, to be honest with you. So I get over there, and they're like a family. So they don't go back, y'all join our movement, or we're starting a movement, be a part. You know, that's kind of an arrogant thing when you think about it. Mm-hmm. Say, we're going to start a movement. You know, you can grow something, but movement, that's a sovereign thing of the Holy Spirit. But when I was with Terry's guys, it's all family-oriented. And so, like, he's a spiritual father, and so they're big into spiritual fathering. So there's multiple spiritual fathers in that group. So churches don't come out of people looking for the right network to start a church out of. Churches come from relationships that people are building that are going to their church. So it's very organic, it's very relational, and it's incredibly family. And so what that did to me when I saw it, I thought, this is what guys are hungry for, even when they join networks. They join a network, right. You know, the leader of the network wants the network to grow, and everybody does. But the reality is guys who join those networks, they're going there because they're wanting relationships. They want to be in something a lot smaller where they can be closer to the leaders and something that they can grow in. And so what I see taking place when you do it as family, you've got a scalable model. I mean, it's what Paul talks about when he talks about spiritual fathers. So, it's kind of like a church with cell groups around the world. They just keep multiplying. Everybody doesn't come to the one thing. And so that's had a huge impact. We've started a couple of hundred churches. I didn't understand this for the longest part. And what happened was I was watching Terry, and I began to realize, well, why are these guys coming around us? It's because they wanted to go see the world with me. They knew I worked around the world with governments and stuff like that. They knew they wanted to learn skills, but they didn't want to just sit in class. They wanted to watch somebody up close. Mm-hmm. And so like now I have a whole group of sons. I'm not, and we try to build a family. And so they go with me. They travel with me. I rarely go crazy places by myself. There's at least one of them always with me. But what I'm doing is I'm teaching them how to build their family. So don't view the family as there's one grand poobah who's we've got one head of the family, and it's Jesus. All right? And so if he's the head, then as a spiritual father, my goal should raise up sons that become spiritual fathers. And so I don't have to be everybody's spiritual father. Right. I don't have to get everybody together and say, look at all the guys I've got. But this is how they do it in China. Because it's all, some guy doesn't accept Christ in China, wake up the next morning and go, oh, I think I'll go start a church. What network do I need to be a part of? Everything is tight. They love the people who led them to the Lord, and there's a relationship there, and they equip them.
That's very apostolic, isn't it? Kind of a movement. And so you talk about modern apostles and prophets that are needed in the church, but it's a hard concept for people to integrate if they're not used to talking in that terminology or seeing that kind of movement happen. And look, there are only a handful in the West that I personally see and know and operate. People like George Miley from Antioch Network, a guy named Elmer Murdoch out of Omaha, Nebraska, possibly in that realm. I think you're stepping more and more into that realm. Talk to us about this whole idea of the apostolic personality, not the person, the gifting, the apostolic gifting, the prophetic gifting that's needed to really kind of crank this thing forward. And what roles do they play, and how do we kind of integrate that into our minds if that's, we have no concept of that in our modern church life?
Yeah, you're right, Doug. I think probably Alan Hirsch has done a better job than anybody in his book, Forgotten Ways, in dealing with what apostolic movements are. I would say Alan's writing is more to the church, and I've told Alan before, I believe that apostolic leadership is not just for the clergy, but I think it's for followers of Jesus in the city. I think Bob Buford was apostolic. He's a business guy, but what does he do? He raises up other businessmen and so forth. So when it comes to a church thing, I would say, and David Devenish, he works with Terry Virgo. He wrote a book called Fathering Movements, is another good book on that. But what I would say about that is, if you read Ephesians, it clearly says that the church is to be led by apostles and prophets. And the reason we don't have movements in America is I don't think we understand apostles and prophets. The pastoral model for most churches in America is a pastor-teacher.
Right.
But what does Ephesians say is supposed to be leading the church? Apostle-prophets. So if it's pastor-teacher, it's I'm going to hug you, and come hear me teach. Well, what an apostle does, the guy is sent. He's sending the church on mission. That's his function. So what is the vision? What is the blueprint? For me, the vision is domains. For me, the blueprint is people using their jobs to engage the society. For me, the blueprint is engaging people of other religions and so forth.
Right.
So that's the apostolic function. Here we go, church. It's the mission of the church. It's here we go. So that doesn't make the pastor-teacher any less important. What it does, it gives a direction to their teaching. If somebody says, that was a phenomenal sermon, I just loved it, it failed. The response to the sermon should be, that was incredible. I know what I need to do with this. Mm. And see, we can sit. Paul writes, knowledge puffs up. And so knowledge without forward motion just let your head get big, and finally it's going to explode.
Right.
How do you move forward? And the prophet is the idea of we're hearing God's voice. What is God saying? Keeping it online. Helping. Prophetically speaking into that. A little more to the left, a little more to the right. Missing it here. So that apostle and prophet are critical. It's like, this isn't a good metaphor, but it's like two horses plowing. It takes both of them. I don't know if people know what plowing would be, but you need both of those leading together so that they're doing that. I think the challenge.
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
Hey, so I have. I'm sorry. Go ahead, man.
No, I'm fine.
Finish up. Okay. We're running out of time, and I have two questions. I'm going to morph into one as we close off because believe it or not, our hour is up already. We can go on for hours on this stuff because it's such great material. Two things. Number one, when pastors thinking about moving into domains, and I know you do quite about domains in the public square and where pastors and ministry leaders should engage and how they should engage in the public square. But the reality is some of these guys and men and women are completely frozen by fear of what that means to them, to potentially to their ministry, to their name, to their reputation. Can you speak to people who think, gosh, that sounds, my heart's there, but I don't know if I can go there because I just don't know what the ramifications will be for me.
Well, I think twofold. I think first of all, how do I say this? There's some crazy things I've gotten involved in because of relationships that have been built. But I think your people will actually like it because what you're doing is you're telling them God's called you. You've got a ministry. I'm going to help you fulfill your ministry. I mean, you're back to Ephesians 4. Now you're equipping people to be the missionary, to be the person that you've called them to be. And I think there's a lot of, but beyond that, there's fears people have. Well, what if it takes money away from my church? What if I get to know people like Muslims and people get nervous about that? Well, I think it makes us uncomfortable because we are so far away from where we were. So I think the first thing that has to happen, we have to realize our job is to equip. Number two, we've got to come to grips with the fact that the church is exploding around the world, not here. What transitions is it going to take to see that happen? And then third of all, I think you take it one day at a time. We've made management and strategic planning so much a part of the church, we don't know how to hear the Holy Spirit anymore. Everybody, even charismatic churches, there's a class on how to be filled with the Spirit. But God help us if somebody starts hearing the Spirit and the Spirit's telling them, God's called me to go here, go there, do this. So I think it's what we've been called to do. But I would say take it in steps. You don't have to do everything at once. And God may call you down a different path. You can only be responsible for those doors and opportunity. You need to be concerned about the whole world. You need to be concerned about everyone. But the way you do that is be faithful to those that God is putting in front of you that you can impact. That's what I would say.
That's good. Thank you so much for an hour of great stuff. I feel like we've only scraped it a little bit. The book is Lessons from the East, Finding the Future of Western Christianity in the Global Church. We highly recommend it for everyone to grab and read and kind of mark and highlight and absorb as much as possible. Pastor Bob Roberts, thank you for a great hour. We appreciate your time.
Thank you, Doug. Enjoyed it.
Hope to come back for something else down the road here. You've been listening to ACN Conversations. We appreciate your time. Thanks for joining us today.
You've been listening to the ACN Conversations, a ministry of the Association of Christian Nonprofits. To hear the full conversation or more clips, visit our website at www.christiannonprofits.org and click on resources. Until next time, I'm Doug Leslie.